and welcome to a new episode of The Damp Show with me, Dampsam. I hope you're well and I hope you're going to enjoy this episode. We've had a lot of questions on our YouTube channel. I've done quite a few videos and people send the questions in and I always answer them as best I can. And as often as I can, and as quick as I can. I'm a busy bloke, and I always try and answer them as quick as I can. But what I thought was, I'll read a few out on here, and I'll answer them on the Damp Show, so it can give some content, and it can help you, the listener, viewer, whichever you are, listener stroke viewer, whichever one you are, get some value from the show. So let's get straight into it. So we've got one. First question here is from Hello Hi 123. What do you think about plastering an open fire shut without putting an air vent in? I did this and it's been fine for years, but my mate says there should be one in. Will I get away with it, or should I put one in? Well, hello, hi there. Welcome to the show if you're listening. So, I'll start by telling you this story about property that I've got and I've had for quite a few years. So this property it's at up at Hoyland in Barnsley. We're currently renovating it, and you should see some of the videos that I'm going to post when we're renovating it, because we're turning it into an SA, service accommodation, where people can come and stop and visit sunny Hoyland and Barnsley. We've got loads of attractions, so you can come and stay there. It's not just for that; it's for kind of corporate lets. So people can come and stay if they're working for a company, or and it's all furnished and it's all done out to a very high standard, or if you're having a house built and you want somewhere to stay for a long time, if you've had your house burnt down and the insurance company's paying, or if you're a gang of builders and you don't want to stay in an hotel, you can all get together, get a bedroom apiece, and you can cook your meals and watch your telly and stuff after you've done work. And then on a weekend, when you go home, we'll clean it and it'll be ready for Monday. So that's what a service accommodation is. And the tenants that were in previously, they sent us some pictures, and they were just to the right of the chimney breast and in the downstairs, there were what looked like a leak. So it will wet through. It was like a strip about 3 inches wide, and it went all the way across wall ceiling angle at the top of the alcove. And when they sent photos, straight away I just thought, there's a pipe up there and it's weeping. There's a pipe leaking. Or it's next door, their bathroom's there, and water's dripping into, and against the wall and on our side. But when I cut the section out, so I cut a section about 2 inches at the side of the wall, and what it was for some reason they must have done some work above it, and floorboards must have been up, and they've swept all soot and everything, because fireplace in that bedroom were blocked up, and they must have just swept all rubbish and debris which contained soot down side at joist, and joist were away front wall, and it ran sort of parallel with party wall, and there were a gap again about 2 inches. And all rubbish and debris had gone down there and were piled up. So once I cut this strip out on ceiling, which which were quite damp, but only for like a couple of. It were damp for about, well, basically up to joist, about 2 inch, 2.5 inch. All this soot dropped down, and luckily I'd covered light shade up, lampshade, and all this soot just dropped straight onto the floor, and that's what were causing issue. The water vapor inside the property is diffusing through ceiling and diffusing through the walls, and it had made and the sulfate salts had soaked onto this bit of board on angle, and it's happened over a long period of time, with them sulfate salts just getting wet from water vapor and moisture, and being sat against a cold wall, just like quite a few different issues, and then that compounded. So some sulfate salts will have come through to start with, and then because they're what's called hygroscopic, they absorb moisture, so then that makes them wetter, and they're also a thing called deliquescent, which means it can become soluble and sort of dissolve into the atmosphere and move to different parts of room, but depending on how wet it is, so it'll have only moved like onto the next bit and onto the next bit. So basically it was just this strip, and this must have happened over 14 years, because when I first bought property and we did all work, there were just no issues, and they've only had these issues this year. So they only sent us the pictures 6 months ago. So it's taken that long for this issue to come to the fore, to sort of what's word I'm looking for, to develop over time. But so what I've done, cut it out, and then I've I think I did a video. So I've cut that strip out, cleaned it out, hoovered it, and then we've formed it. I've put a board. I cut it back halfway across joist, put a new plasterboard in, and then I've put dry flex adhesive and dry flex membrane on ceiling, down wall, and then on part at chimney breast, and then skimmed it in, so that it creates a barrier, and there's no salt's going to come through. So that's on that little bit. But what I was saying is this chimney breast didn't have any vent in it. So on Monday, I knocked a hole in the middle, a bit up off the floor where I thought the fireplace would have been, because I had a knockabout, and it must have been bricked up, so it had been bricked up with concrete blocks as well. So I cut this all in, went all the way through, so now there's a vent, so the air can flow in through bottom at chimney when we actually fit a vent on it, like a plastic vent, and then up and out at pot at top, and what that does, it creates airflow through the flue or the flues, and just stops condensation forming and stops moisture forming inside, and then in turn it'll stop any salts migrating to the surface of the chimney breast. So what I'd say is, it can take years. This is my point. It can take up to like I said, 14 years that I've had it. Maybe 50. It might even be 15 years. I did it in 2000 and about 2008 is when I did it. I'm just thinking whether it was second house. I didn't know, it was third house. So it was my third house that I bought and renovated. So it can take a long time. So I'd always advise, if you can get a vent in, put a vent in. But there's some houses and that you'll not have an issue for some reason. Either I don't know, if they're sealed up, bricks might be that thick, and there might not be any cracks in bricks, no holes, or mortar might be solid, so it just might take forever for it to come through. But I'd always advise put an air vent in your chimney downstairs and your chimney upstairs, and allow that air to flow, and then you're not going to get any issues. These are in old houses, in older type houses. So yes, I would say put one in. Dampsam says stick a vent in. Right. The second question, number 2, and it's in a similar theme. So Breakthrough DJ Academy says, I have an Edwardian terrace blessed with open fireplaces around the house. In my dining room, the previous owner removed the fireplace and boarded up the opening. The whole room is to be skimmed. He's got an A, B and a C here. So, A, should I be installing an air vent? The chimney has a cowl on top. So, reverting back to what I said on that last question, I'd say yes. Make sure you get an air vent in, allow that air to flow up the chimney and stop it from any condensation from forming inside. Stop the inside of the flue becoming wet, and allow that air to flow. And this B part of the question, should I be treating the chimney breast with something before the gypsum goes on? So only thing I can think is that because finished plaster is gypsum, gypsum based, that he's thinking that should he treat the chimney breast with something before he puts the gypsum on? Well, if you've got some patches, sulfate patches already, you'll need to isolate them. But a tip, because if you get a lot of high humidity in the property in winter, you might not see them. It might be spring when he's looking at chimney breast, and you might not see them, or summer, or even autumn, and you're not be able to see these patches because they'll not be absorbing moisture. So one thing you could do, get 2 kettles. If you've got 2 kettles or a kettle, run an extension to chimney breast, and boil a kettle. Or if you've got a wallpaper steamer, open it up, put it near chimney breast on edge, get it working and get that steam coming out, and that'll show up any issues. You'll be able to see whether you've got any sulfate salts in there, because them salts will absorb moisture, and you'll be able to see staining, or you'll be able to see wetness on it. So that's a tip. And if you have got any, then you need to isolate them. How do we isolate them? Depending on whether your plaster's sound or solid, you can either use, if it's only a small bit, you could use a liquid DPM, liquid damp proof membrane. We use dry base from Safeguard, or dry flex membrane and adhesive, which is you put that on with a trowel. That you mix the adhesive up, using looking at the manufacturer's instructions, because I'll just say, if you don't look at manufacturer's instructions and you just think you can mix it up, a bit like if it's a plasterer, you think, I'll just mix it up until lumps are gone, then because that's what you do with finish. You'll just, if you're mixing skimming up, and if you mix finish up and you're going to skim a wall, a plasterer will just tip a bag in, or even tile adhesive. I've seen tilers and they just tip it in. Now, if you read manufacturer instructions, they'll tell you how long to mix it for. I don't know if this applies to finish, but I'm certain it applies to tile adhesive. That you're mixing, that's in a powder form, and it definitely applies to dry flex adhesive. And what it says on dry flex adhesive thing is, once you get it to correct thickness, so you keep putting it in, you think, that's correct thickness, but there's still lumps in it, Then you have to time and set your drill going, your mixer, and you have to mix it for 3 minutes. So you put your stopwatch on and you mix it for 3 minutes once you've got the required thickness. And not a lot of people know that. Not a lot of people know that. So so that's what you have to do. Always read manufacturer's instructions and see what they say to mix it. And then what you do is you put that on as a plaster, and then you use a notching trowel one way and then other to get like a 10mm thickness, and to get it quite even. And then you put your dry flex, your pre-cut dry flex adhesive on. No, dry flex membrane on, not adhesive. A typo that. That'll get edited out of it. So you put that on, and then you iron it in to get any air bubbles out. So you go over it with a dry trowel, not a wet trowel. So you'd have 3 trowels on job: trowel for putting on, a notching trowel, and a trowel for ironing in. A dry trowel for ironing in. So get that done, and then you skim over the top the next day once it's dry. Don't be trying skimming it while it's wet; it'll be sliding all over. So so that's what you do. Isolate any salts. So the next question is, it's from D, and D says, would you advise to use lime plaster after the damp proofing has been done, instead of sand and cement with a salt inhibitor in, then skimming to avoid any gypsum plaster? Right, so this was other day actually. I think I answered this, so but I thought it'd be nice to tell people on here. So what D is saying is, the system that he or she has seen is sand and cement render with a salt inhibitor, but there's a lightweight plaster. So there's lime plasters, lime based plasters, that's been specifically made for applying to a wall after a damp proof course has been drilled and injected. Now what I'm saying is there's lots of different systems on market that you can use. Now, when I first started it back in the 80s, it was predominantly sand and cement with a waterproofer in, or a salt inhibitor and waterproofer in, and plasticizer, which kind of made it workable. And most companies use that method. But now there's quite a few different methods. So as well as sand and cement render, you've also got the lime based salt inhibiting plaster. So you've got one called Render Light, which Sovereign do, and then you've got but that basically is Sovereign's had I'm just trying to think of the name of the company. Tilcon. They've had Tilcon put their name on bags of Limelight plaster, and it's Limelight backing plaster, not Limelight renovating. So Limelight do two plasters. They do Limelight backing and Limelight renovating plaster, and it's Limelight backing that's got your salt inhibitor in. So and that is Render Light. So they buy it and market it as Render Light, and it's a good product. The only flaw that it had, I'll tell you a story about Limelight, and this is how the damp companies found out that there were a flaw with it. So when I worked for Guardian Building Services back in the 80s, years and years ago, we used to replaster for all big boys. So we do replastering for Rentokil, Peter Cox, Timberwise, and a company called ProTim. They were all big ones. They'd prepare all walls, they'd do drilling, injecting, and knocking off, and then we'd go and replaster it. Sometimes we had to knock off, but Majority of the time we had to replaster it, and they got a contract to do these council houses in Scunthorpe, and some of them were breeze block, some of them were onto brickwork, and we'd just go and replaster them. Now, some of the walls were really thin, so when they knocked plaster off, you were only putting it on really thin. And back then, I were I'd have been about 20, so I weren't as knowledgeable as what I am now to do a damp proofing, and this is one of the reasons why I became knowledgeable, because I knew that there were a lot of people misinstalling damp proofing services, and we put it on with best intentions. So we put it on, mixed it up in bath, did what it said. You said you had to leave it for so long, and then put it on onto walls. But there were a lot of leeway for user error. This is so I got told. I'd left this company, but what happened? They got that many callbacks to this site, this big council estate in Scunthorpe, with the limelight failing, and what it was because it were getting put on too thin. So if it's not a certain thickness, the limelight or render light, if it's not a certain thickness, then issues can occur. So they had loads of problems. And now when you if you get render light from Sovereign, there's a different way that you've got to mix it up. So they've got a set of instructions now. So you've got to prep the wall with an SBR mixed with one of their products. So this is like a kind of a glue, and then you have to, when you mix in the render light, you have to put an amount of SBR in with water and mix the render light up, so that you've got render light. I'm just trying to think. It's called a primer or a stucco. So you've got a slurry of this SBR mix on your wall, and then you've got SBR in your limelight, and SBR onto SBR. That creates a proper bond. And SBR has got like a waterproofing properties as well, so that helps as well. So so back in 80s and 90s, we were told just to damp wall down and put it on. But now, because of all issues that they've had with it, now you have to do a lot of other things. But you can skim when it's once it's set and it's dry, you can skim it with a gypsum plaster if you wanted to. But these are specialist finished plaster what Tilcon do. It's a white plaster and it's cement based, and it just takes forever to go off. And every time you put a bit of water on it, it knocks it back up, and it's good once you've got it. It's a high density, high protection finish, so it's a bit harder than a gypsum finish, but it kind of does the same job, and you can paint it. You can use a gypsum finish. There's no reason why you can't use a gypsum finish once if it's dried out correctly. And I think someone's telling me that you've got to leave it 2 days as well. But you're supposed to leave render. You're supposed to leave sand and cement render with the additives in. That's supposed to be left 3 days to dry before you skim it. And I know that because I once got a sheet for a council's. It were a council contract, and they sent me a sheet through to price up offer, and that's what they wanted you to do. You had to leave it once you put your render on. It had to be left 3 days before you skimmed it. So you imagine trying to price a job up like that. It's a nightmare. And that's to stop any shrinkage and cracking and things like that. But the other methods that you can use, the other systems that you can use, is the membranes. So a lot of companies who don't realise, well, a lot of companies who don't trust their employees and want something bulletproof, they'll put membrane up to 120, drill it into wall, and then put a plasterboard on top. So stick a plasterboard on top of membrane. And you know my thoughts on this. It don't need to be done. So you can cut that membrane part out and use Safeguard's fast system if you trust your employees to install it right. And I think a lot of companies just don't trust their employees to use this system. They think if they put membrane on wall, it's kind of bulletproof because it creates a barrier. So even if you get high ground level, even if you get, well, I don't know what the thinking is, but they could end up having a more profitable company by employing Safeguard's express damp proofing system. But I mean this is what I'm kind of on a crusade to try and get people to use, because we want to use less plastic in the world, don't we? But yet these companies are, they fetch these membranes out. It just, for damp proofing above ground, it's just no need. There's no need for it. And all these companies are wrapping these houses in damp proofing membranes, then sticking plasterboards to it. So it's taking them a lot longer to install these systems, whereas they can use the fast express damp proofing system, which were brought out by Safeguard, who were the leading manufacturers, the first company to fetch out creams. It's the leading cream, dry zone cream. I know it's one of the most expensive because it's the best and it's the strongest, and I could go on. And I don't get paid out by Safeguard, but I do like them because they fetched the creams out, which got me into damp proofing to start with, because I didn't want to use high pressure system for all flaws that it had, and then they fetched the express system out. And anybody that knows dampness affects walls of buildings, when you study the system and how it works, it's kind of a no-brainer. So basically it's a plasterboard, which is cheap, one of the cheapest products you can get. You can buy it in a 90. You can buy a plasterboard in a 900mm or a 120mm, so you can knock it off at 120, and you don't have to cut your plasterboard. Well, you knock it off at 124, and then you pack your board up if it's a solid floor. You hack your plaster off. You put a salt neutralising cream on wall. You let that dry. You cut your plasterboards. You put dry grip on back, dots of dry grip on back. You see my videos on YouTube. It shows you exactly how to install it. And then you ease your board onto the wall. If you want to put Instastick on, this is what I do. Put Instastick on, because Instastick, it cures in about 5 to 10 minutes. So if you put some Instastick dots on, put it against wall, hold it in place with some props for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and that'll hold on itself. You dry grip, that takes a bit longer to grab, what I call grab. So it might take 15-20 minutes. So just for fastness, I'll just use some Instastick, which is polyurethane foam, and it's quite waterproof. It is waterproof. So it's closed cell polyurethane, and it's waterproof. And it won't matter if it weren't waterproof, because it has got damp proof capabilities to it. And once you put it on wall, and if you put your drilled your damp proof course in, if it is rising damp, then that wall's going to dry out over the next few months. So it's not going to be in contact with a wet through wall. So wall behind it's going to end up dry. And what it also does is it creates a cavity. So you've got like a small dot on wall, which is, again, that's waterproof. It's like an acrylic dot, and you've got like a small cavity for air to flow across and evaporate any ingress that does come off at wall before it returns to equilibrium, as we say. That means turns back dry in relation to the rest of the walls in room. So, and like I said, one of the best systems going. Companies could cut a job out, still to put plasterboard on, still to drill injecting, still to got knock off, but yeah, they've added another job, putting this this membrane up wall. So I think what'll happen is, more when soon as companies see this system and can actually, actually use it, I think what's going to happen is that they're going to come over to the damp side and start using it more often. I hope to get shares in Safeguard before it does happen, because they're going to be a rich company unless other companies can create their own dry grip. In fact, Sovereign Sovereign's got soft stick, and Sovereign sent me some over. Problem is it's just slightly more fluid than dry grip. Dry grip's a bit stiffer. I have used it. There was a shortage of dry grip, and I used the Sovereign one, and Sovereign one does take a lot longer to grab than dry grip. But I'm sure there's going to be other companies make their own version, and there might be a quicker setting one. So watch this space. So I think that's about it. So I hope I've answered your questions, and I hope you've enjoyed listening to me drone on about damp proofing, and I hope you've got some value. So if you have, head over to you can like this video and leave some comments in the comments section and questions. And if it's, like I said, each week we'll try and answer some questions. Well, I say each week, when we get time, we'll try and answer some questions from people, and give you even more value than what we are doing. And if you have got any issues, get onto YouTube. I'll have done a video about damp issues in somebody's house. Just put your search in. It's second biggest search engine in world, YouTube. Search for Dampsam, and then just put your issue. Dampsam chimney, Dampsam damp proofing course, Dampsam patches on wall, and I'll come up and I'll have done a video. And watch me cure it, or watch me sort it out, and watch me explain it in a no-nonsense northern style. So that's Dampsam signing off. See you next week.